So we're back. Opportunity for whatever questions you have. Time to inquire into the Dharma. Clarify any points in your practice. Ask irrelevant questions.
Hey, get irrelevant in.
Yeah.
Get irrelevant in.
Right. So I'm going to start now. Mic etiquette. So it's
Mic etiquette.
so directly.
This is Mike etiquette.
Mic etiquette. Yeah, I knew him in high school.
Yeah. Mike Etiquette. Is that the cousin of Bob Etiquette?
Yeah, right. So yesterday I asked Lama Michael about courage in relation to the path. And it occurred to me a follow-up question that having to do with contentment. I remember Lama Michael a while ago was teaching, or was bringing it up a lot, the importance of practicing contentment. And then beyond that, I'm thinking about the practice of joy. Like, I forget where it is in the mind training, but there's always rely on
A joyful mind.
a joyful mind. And it occurred to me later on yesterday that there's an answer to this courage question in those two practices. And so I'd like to hear about that.
Sounds a little bit like you've answered your own question. Next.
What is that answer, Jeff? Is that?
There's got to be more than that.
No, what was the connection you made? And what's the actual question embedded in it?
Well, the original question is I wanted to hear more about that for my own benefit. So if I reflect further, that faced with, when I contemplate the enormity of the path,
Mm-hmm.
and as you mentioned at the beginning, the vastness of it, and I was thinking about the relationship between all and each, like all of it and each little bit of it.
Mm-hmm. Good.
If you could get just stuck. I could get just stuck staring at it. Sometimes I do. I just stare at it. I don't know that anything really happens. I just stare at it. Or I can recoil. But in order to go forward without just stumbling forward blindly, in order to bring something positive to the future, right? Because the present's always moving to the future, we're going to bring something better. In order to do that, I have to find myself in that something positive to bring. I have to find it in me. So I have to, or manufacture it, or at least pretend. And I remember when Lama Michael brought up the idea of contentment as a practice, not as something that you just find one morning, well, I'm content today, everything's going okay, but actually to choose it, to choose contentment. That was a big opening for me. I have a T-shirt that my sister gave me that's got a Chinese character, and it says contentment, and it says to hold on to and let go of everything all the time. And then a Chinese friend of mine, Taiwanese friend of mine, said that it actually, what the character actually means is, okay. Doesn't mean content. She always has a quizzical look on her face when I wear that T-shirt. But it's still nice. But then I'm thinking about actually practicing joyfulness. And I don't know, some days I can do that. I don't exactly know how that happens. Just look for something beautiful, a beautiful sky or something. I look for beauty. Beauty helps me a lot. That's a personal thing. I don't know if it helps everybody, but I make that assumption a lot, that beauty helps everybody.
So I think the key is in the cultivation of contentment, seeing what that practice is. And the contentment there's one element in the Guru Yoga prayer, contentment. May contentment bless me that contentment may arise in my being. It's the term in there is actually interesting. It's a state. The gu is this wanty, needy, and the may is not. May the continuum free of wanty, needy arise. May the continuum of experience of freedom from wanting, needy, and that's so we tend to think I am contented. Sort of, I've had enough to eat. I am content. I've had enough in order to be content. And this, in this case, the contentment is freedom from the sense of compulsion to need something in order to be content. And that's an easy jump from there to the joy.
When we were on 1 year retreat, Lama Tara gave a teaching on this to us, basically telling us, you're going to get in those 10 by 12 cabins and many moments of discontent will arise because you just have none of the distractions, nothing. You can't jump on your computer or go have a snack or just, no. So she told this story about this young boy. I don't know how she knew him, but he had a little television set. This was in the old days, folks, TV sets, in his room. And his parents, for his birthday, got him a bigger one. And he looked at it and he said, "No, I don't need that one. This is enough for me," pointing at his old one. And so she said, use that phrase, "This is enough for me." And I used that hundreds of times to calm my mind down, to train my mind. And then you say it, and then you check in, and you kind of see it actually is. This is enough. This is enough right here. My mind is going, but doesn't have to get believed. So I like that one. This is enough for me. Yeah.
If you have confidence that this, if once you've had the experience a little bit of not needing an excuse for contentment or joy, or even a trigger, then that phrase becomes even more powerful.
So I have a few questions, but the one that I guess relates to what you were talking about, Jeff, the most is I happened to be listening to the radio this week, and I don't even remember who it was that came on the radio on NPR and was talking about, I believe he was a psychologist or some professional in that realm, but he was talking about his experience with Buddhism, his experience with meditation, and as it relates to kind of the biological drive for reproduction or to propagate our species or to what motivates us to continue to want to put forth the project of life. So he was talking about if we were ever content, we would never do anything. Meaning, like, if we were ever content, we would never spread the gene pool. We would never eat. We would never do these things. So, I mean, I just wonder, like, maybe it's silly, but at the same time, it had me thinking. So, like,
yes.
if you're ever gonna be truly content, well, then you would just. You would stop at some point pursuing things, and there is this notion of kind of withdrawing from certain pursuits in the path, and I just wondered what your thoughts are about that.
Well, now. It's my first caution is to avoid getting too abstract about this.
That's always mine.
Yeah, that's the first one. But then to look at it, I'm thinking about certain aspects of the first turning teachings where this kind of extinguishment is actually a goal. And if you think about it, but that's very self-oriented. And we're thinking, since we're full of the wanting, needy mind, that, great Scott, if I was truly, really content, then boy, would I be not content with that, because that would mean I would have no desires. I wouldn't do anything. I would just be terribly uncontent with this notion of being completely contented. But we kind of go that way because we don't actually see things from the other side. But the Mahayana perspective would say that seeing that this wanty, needy state is still capturing all sentient beings. There's no disengagement. There's no disengagement because we're kind of, we joined the club. We're part of the sentient being club. And until all the members of the sentient being club are free from the wanting neediness, then we're still engaged. But it shifts. Instead of being based on this notion of kind of an intrinsic personal need, it's more a matter of just engaging. So we can engage without that sense of compulsion, without that sense of fundamental anxiety. We can engage from the point of view of always rely on a joyful mind. That really only makes sense from the Mahayana perspective, the larger perspective of engaging with the project, you could say, of the liberation of all beings.
That makes sense. From a Mahayana perspective, that makes sense. Why does our hotship or the completion of Hinayana stage exist? Is it for them to be reborn in order to engage in the next vehicle?
Oh, I don't really want to go there. Yeah.
It depends on which level you would ask. They would talk about each other differently. So our hotship, Hinayana level people believe that's a complete path. So Mahayanas don't think that's a complete path. Hinayanas thinks Mahayanas have made up a path. And so the Buddha never said that. So we don't need to go there. The reality is people, the Buddha did teach many, many paths, so different personalities could go. And for some people, the whole Bodhisattva path is just utterly overwhelming. It's like, I can't, maybe they're stunned into immobility. So for them, start with yourself, free yourself. You know, I mean, I've heard Mahayana teachers say that fundamental path, when they finally, quote, free themselves, which I don't know what kind of freedom that is, but then they experience another awakening where they see, oh, I only got this far, even though I thought I was doing the whole thing. Yeah. But, you know, I wanted to say about the contentment thing that if I was talking to the author of that, I would say, have you ever gotten even close to contentment yourself? Like, really sit for many hours with your mind. I think the danger of us getting so contented that we wouldn't do anything is very tiny and may not even exist.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think that's our biggest danger.
No.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Matthew.
I'd actually like to ask about contentment as well, specifically contentment with one's practice as it is, moment to moment, because I've never really felt any genuine sense of like contentment with my practice as it is. I always want to be either I'm not doing as much and that discourages me, or I'm taking on new practices that I don't feel either I don't feel confident in practicing them, or I'm not motivated to practice them. So I'm just really kind of, because like for me, discontent really makes it harder to actually act, and it's actually like it's harder to be motivated.
I think it's extremely common to engage in our practice. Well, I'll back up. It's unavoidable to engage in practice except for within our own usual personal style. And if our personal style has a lot to do with not feeling satisfied with ourselves, then when we open the door to go in and sit down and practice, that style comes with us. So it's something to really put front and center. You really have to say, okay, here it is. Here is my habit, my particular style of being discontented, and my particular proclivity for that. Let's just put it right down here. And then in a certain way, you have to heap all your practice, like in the mind training, heap all your practice on the worst point. If your worst point is getting in your own way with feeling discontent about things, then you really have to just put that front and center and always keep that in mind. Because no matter what, we will always, one of my favorite metaphors that I think I invented is it's like trying to high jump while holding the bar.
Don't let go.
No matter how high you get, all you're going to see is it's still up there.
Yeah, let go.
You really have to let go of that, and in that, the notion of what success looks like. There are ways to approach your practice so that when you're learning a practice, you can make the skillful discoveries about what's actually kind of going along, making it kind of quote work, and what's making it not work. And if you're particularly a more complex practice, are you getting the stages memorized in the proper order? So that, just set that part aside, because there's kind of, oh, did I get that right or not? But even in that, to kind of abandon the sharp edge of the knife, to leave the knife leave the knife outside the door when you do that. But in the practice itself, that practice of discovering that there is this potential to be beyond this wanting neediness. You actually have to treat the wanting neediness like it's this annoying kid that's following you around. And you spend your whole life trying to get away from it. You're always kind of going like this, like that. And so what you have to do, you have to spin around and grab that kid. Give it a great big hug and a kiss. You do that directly with your experience. You turn straight into the feeling of it that is, this is not right. This is not complete. You have to turn straight into that. And if you can actually turn straight into that and just rest right in that, not in the secondary evidence for what's wrong, but just straight into the feeling of this isn't right. This is not quite it. We're not there yet. There's something really remarkable can happen when you can relax right there. But you have to it's like a really nice warm hug. And spinning around, looking straight back at it. So that's, and the more that we can do that, the more that we can really rest with experience as it arises, as opposed to sort of, we think experience as it arises ought to look like this. So instead of looking at our experience, we're always looking over here. We're looking for something else. We're always looking for something else other than what's arising.
Thank you.
Susan.
I don't really know how to ask this question without talking about something personal. So first of all. I've been very ill for many years, experiencing amazing physical things with Crohn's disease, which has isolated me a great deal and has made me think about a lot of things in some interesting ways. So for me, contentment, I'm very interested in this because for me, acceptance has been the key. So when in tremendous pain, if I accept it, I'm content. Because I'm neither pushing it away or I'm not grasping or pushing. And I don't have that whiny bit of like, why me? This is awful. I wish this wasn't happening to me. I just accept it because this is what is in my experience. Mm-hmm. However, I'm not sure how it fits with what you're talking about. And because I've found that some of the things I've come up with over this long and very interesting retreat have been a little delusive, I'd like you to, make some help comment on it.
Which part do you want comment on?
You choose.
Well, but I didn't actually hear a question.
Okay. I tend to do that, don't I? Okay, my question is, how does acceptance fit with contentment? Is it something that, is that a part of what you're talking about?
Oh,
or
yeah.
is
Oh, yeah.
acceptance separate from that? And can acceptance,
no.
in your opinion, in your wisdom, does acceptance have a lot to do with being content, neither grasping nor, shoving things away, nor being apathetic?
Yeah. No, acceptance is, you could say that's another word to cover the same kind of thing. And I think the kind of experience that you've had, that you've described, I'm quite well aware over the years that you've had to just, there isn't another way around this. You haven't been given a detour, 5 miles, you can get around somehow. You have had no detours, and sometimes when you have absolutely no detours, you can actually discover something that is fundamentally very useful that most of us can't discover because we always have the entertainment or the whatever, we have the God realm at our beck and call. Hot and cold running servants and all the rest of it. So, but when something like a chronic disease arises, you can have an opportunity to discover something that other people don't readily discover. And I think, and Matthew, you've often brought up this thing of dissatisfaction. So in a certain way, you may have an opportunity to discover something that others who are, like myself, who have a much more lackadaisical and happy-go-lucky kind of preset button. It took a long time to even notice what I was doing, because I could always somehow manage to cheat and arrange things so it seemed like it was working out pretty well. No, it's not so bad, but it's not liberation. And that's as long as the circumstances arise where you can take the detour, it's okay. But in our lives, in this life, there are usually more than one occasion where there is no way around it. And there's certainly at least the process of dying where there is no way around it. And this is something that the more we're able to actually find this place of fundamental contentment, this place that isn't dependent upon things turning out one way or another. The more that we can actually cultivate that, the more we have access to something that is very useful, whether it's in chronic pain or at the time of death, which involves all kinds of things that we would rather detour, but we can't.
In my experience, now that I'm feeling a whole lot better, I am very easily distracted. I am no longer right in the moment all the time. I have a much busier mind, and I seek more distractions in things like I've hurt my finger by playing too much solitaire on my phone.
Amen, sister.
Yesterday, one of the things that Lama Michael shared is that was quite powerful for me was we're not practicing this path to improve our current life. That would be what Venerable Chidran calls Dharma light, L-I-T-E, practice Dharma light. I sat, I feel kind of better. Nothing wrong with that. But if you're going to be on the Mahayana path, on the Bodhisattva path, which you really want to end suffering for all time, all kinds of suffering, you're not so concerned with how good you feel in this life or in this moment. A lot of these really difficult diseases, for example, when I got breast cancer, my one Lama that helped me so much, guide me through, he said to me one day, you need to stop thinking about this as anything except purifying past karma, period. That's all this is for you. Don't think about it as anything else, because you'll just consider yourself a victim, you'll fall into all these. In other words, you'll add to your suffering. You've already got the suffering, but don't add to it. Be very clear. This is just in this life, some kind of karma and some kind of purifying. Meet it like that. So it's kind of that thing and that helped me a lot, because I noticed every time I met it like that, to the best I could, I felt fine. I felt like, okay, And every time I slipped off of that, I felt not good. I mean, like more not good than I already didn't feel good. And so Lama Michael was talking yesterday about a heroic kind of path. And I think that's what Geshe-la was putting before me and before others. You have to take this not like a hero that blows stuff up and everything, but a much more complex kind of hero, like meet suffering, meet whatever it is. Mostly what they also guided me was to see I had more generosity given to me, more kindness given to me, and what you said, I have more clarity in those moments. And I don't feel like I have that now. I'm not wishing myself to have something to get that, but you're really up against it, and that clarity stays there, So maybe that's what the purification is. But it's just, there are ways to get through these things on the Mahayana path that aren't so clear otherwise. But this sense of, we're not here to just feel good. Feeling good will come. It seems to be quite a constant side effect of the Mahayana path. But if that's what you're headed for this relative everyday self to feel good all the time, A, you won't accomplish it, and B, you'll miss opportunity to do something much, much more fun, exciting, meaningful with our lives. Yeah. That's how I meet it.
So I've had this question for a while, talking about taking care of yourself. So you still want to put some effort into, like people do yoga, they run, all these things to take care of ourselves so that we feel better, so that we're able to go on. So there's a, you know, it seems at some point a person isn't, if you're on the bodhisattva path, you shouldn't be paying so much attention to that as being on the cushion about how you are. So
No, it's motivation. So you run with the motivation. For example, you could run with the motivation to have a healthy body because you are practicing the path, to have a long life, to continue practicing the path. So you see, you open your motivation. I'm not just running so I feel good. I might feel good, great. I don't personally feel so good when I run, but take something that you like. I love to walk in nature, but set up the motivation. Do you see? It's that thing we were talking about this morning and yesterday. You set the view of I'm here no matter what I'm thinking, saying, or doing. Running, putting my clothes on, having a shower, eating good food, sitting on a cushion, doing prostration. I'm here for the benefit of others. All those things are fine. It's not the activity, it's the motivation. It's the why am I doing this? So then where my confusion comes up is when have I fallen into the ditch of pampering myself, and when have I fallen into the other ditch of being mean and driving myself? So those need to be watched and worked with, but being clear all the time, whichever ditch I fall in or I get in the middle of the road, I am clear on my motivation, and it's broader than my own bubble. Does that help, Linda? Yeah. I don't know what else you might want to say.
No, that's it. Yeah, that there is that the piece. Dora talked about it a little bit this morning, mentioning Trungpa Rinpoche's comment that there being a little bit of a problem with the ideas about compassion in the West. It seems like in the West, if you have one person suffering, and then you have another person who's engaged in compassion, all of a sudden you have two people who are suffering. And the first person isn't really actually helped because the second person is just kind of wallowing in some feeling about it. And so the notion with compassion is actually to be able to be of benefit. And it's not possible to really do that deeply unless we really see through our own stuff. So this is one of the reasons that they talk about the two benefits. The two benefits are always in the prayers: benefit of self, benefit of others. So that's recognized. I mean, it's in the formula. You don't even have to go at it sort of indirectly. But unless we're actually capable, we can't be of benefit.
I was reading Ken MacLeod's book, Silver River, and he's talking about his experience in one of the retreats that he was on, of being so sick, and yet he doesn't. I mean, I've heard this. They're on retreat and they don't seek medical help, but you would think that they would want to get well so that they would have a longer life to help others. So I guess that's kind of what got my head going.
Oh, okay. That's a tricky question, a little bit. But a lot of the literature over the hundreds of years of people being on retreat and people just saying, well, it's better to just die on retreat. Part of that is predicated on a circumstance where there wasn't anything you could have done about it if you went somewhere else. Nobody was, I mean, they might have been able to set a broken bone or give you a few herbs, but most things really were not. So that it's a different situation now. And I think it's actually a mistake in our culture to take that to an extreme. It's not necessary from the point of view of well, there's no option. So there are options. We can't actually deal with a lot of illness, a lot of problems like that. So there are options. The other problem is that in our culture, we don't have a larger sense of appreciation for the power of doing a retreat. And so if somebody ups and dies on retreat when they could have had a relatively simple medical procedure, then the outcome in general is not so good. There's a lot of reaction, and a lot of people would have kind of negative reaction about that. So part of it's context and part of it's what's possible.
Yeah, and in that part about what's possible, you know, the stories of the great bodhisattvas, we don't understand that we can develop capacities to the point where what the average person would call suffering, the bodhisattva is actually experiencing it as a kind of joy. So, you know, like the stories of, I think it was Atisha who cut a piece of his leg off to feed to to feed to somebody who needed it, or taking maggots out of someone's wound with his tongue so that he didn't hurt the maggots, you know. I mean, these stories are handed down. They seem so extreme, but I think what they're pointing at, and one thing people might want to look at, is the 10 levels of bodhisattva's achievements. You know, you start on this path, and we're, you know, somewhere trying to get onto the path, or having flashes of, you know, of really authentic compassion and authentic insight. But, you know, if you keep practicing this, it is guaranteed that you will have all these kind of powers. And those powers include things like being able to control the 5 elements. I mean, because think if you have a mind that's total compassion, not fake kind, not confused kind, but really total compassion, total joy. Do you think things would bother and stop you? No. So bodhisattvas get that, and then they can be anywhere. In fact, they make, like the Blue Medicine Buddha made prayers to come back in the most difficult times. May I appear in the most difficult times where there's wars, times where there's a lot of distress. That's where I want to be. And doing that, not like this Christian, you know, whipping yourself, self-sacrifice, but doing it with total joy. I want to do that. That's so cool. Because by that time, what they say about bodhisattvas, they have a very hard time finding a challenge after a while. Now imagine that. I mean, really, they're like happy to see someone who's totally screwed up, because they're like, yeah, now I can practice. I mean, this is really, I don't think this is fairyland. This is, if you just think about it logically, we're not going to stay this exact same way life after life. If you practice this, you're gonna be it. That's the whole point of it. Anyway, I think it's very cool. It's possible.
Just as the vastness of numbers of sentient beings and the vastness of time and space, in the same way, the depth of the practice is also very, very vast.
Yeah, no limit.
You feel content, all right.
You too content to ask.
I actually I feel contentment. This discussion's pretty good. Kind of one away question.
Okay.
I like that piece of like, there's like a sense
Here, use the mic for this people streaming.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they can't hear you otherwise.
For the benefit of others.
Yes, it's true.
I like that idea you said, it's like joy is a step away from contentment. It makes sense. It's like finding peace with that, and then there's a joy that comes from that. I don't know, it just kind of fit. So it's been really helpful. Thank you.
I have a question about finding joy and helping others, and kind of how it relates to, I guess, maybe cultural trauma or the climate of our culture. I find that sometimes it's hard to not go into a state of trying to protect oneself from the trauma, the emotional trauma and exposure to just everyday life in this culture. And I wonder how, we might kind of bolster ourselves to not give in to that tendency to protect oneself and hide rather than expose and open your heart and be present for other beings.
I'm not sure the equation has only two variables. Because I think there is one of the themes that we mentioned is the capacity to actually be of benefit. We have to actually develop that capacity. So it's the thing about sort of exposing ourselves, and there's something in the phrasing of that sounds a little bit like I've grabbed the lash to kind of expose my back to the lash and lash myself a little bit. So I think I think we actually have to approach that more from that sense of having cultivated our stability and cultivated our sense of groundedness and you could say even personal power. And so to approach things from a point of view of strength, as opposed to going out and sort of feeling kind of weak, and so then exposing ourselves and then not being able to lift very much, and there's something kind of there's something not there.
Right. From your perspective, what does that sense of personal power come from?
It comes from stability of mind, and it comes from contentment. To really see that it's not dependent. And then the deeper that goes, the more we can be present with situations at kind of, you could say, different energy levels, where we're not. A lot of times, it's easy to kind of get a little stability, and then go into a situation, and we just kind of add some sort of peaceful influence. That's kind of easy. in relatively, it's kind of a simple situation. We're just there, and just kind of a peaceful engagement. We actually don't really do very much except for not really get involved in all the things that, we're not pushing away, and we're not lecturing, we're not lecturing people. We're just there and content. But we can, the more that contentment is really there, and the less sense of personal agenda that there is, the less fear there is in being able to step into other situations and have a kind of a higher level of energy, of engagement, and not be pulled out, not be pulled off balance. But that requires deeper practice. The more the energy goes up, the more likely that we will do whatever it is that we habitually do when the energy goes up. We'll call the fire department, and depending on which fire district we live in, they will either come and use hatchets and chop the building up to keep it from burning down, or they'll do something very skillful. So it depends on the fire. It depends on our practice. It depends on our practice. So,
I suppose if you're practicing, just crisis response and freak out, that's who you call.
That's it. Yeah. Freak Out Incorporated. How may I help you?
I think it's a really good question, and I think to me it comes back where that stability comes from is more of the on the cushion practice for me. Like when we practice calm abiding, then we really see what our minds are like. We do it a lot more. The mind calms down, and in those moments, we're more in touch with reality. Even, I don't mean like a big boing, a flash of light or anything, but we get in touch with the reality of the suffering of our own distracted minds. I mean, you just sit there and it's like, God, this is crazy, I mean, and you see it, and you don't grab anything, but you just see it. Yeah. Pretty constant. That's gone, that's gone, that's gone. And we start experiencing reality, and the Dalai Lama talks about getting the strength of getting in, what's the word when you're in consort with, you're flowing with. So when we're flowing with reality, which is both the reality of our own goodness and the goodness of others, the Buddha nature, and the reality at the same time of the really klesha crazy, all there at the same time. But we get big enough to see that and be somewhat stable with it, then it's not so hard being anywhere, Bodhisattvas can go be in war zones and be pretty calm. Yeah. And we know from stories even of the Holocaust, if you read any of the Holocaust survivor stories, kindness showed up there, courage showed up there, the way they took care of each other, the way they survived. Just amazing how Buddha nature just shows up anywhere, everywhere. It never doesn't show up. We just don't tend to see it. It shows up in probably Charlottesville, Some people didn't get crazy yesterday. Some people helped each other. Or you think of that shooting in Orlando. And there were so many amazing stories of people really just caring for each other as they were shot at, So this is our true nature. We just kind of get freaked that it's not there. Where is it? It's not there. All you have to do is sit down and calm down. And as Bill says, don't call the fire department every time. Yeah,
We have to develop your own fire department that is truly skilled.
yeah, right.
That's it.
That's been my experiences, I guess. Just practicing, and the more I practice, the more accessible the 911 call can be to the right people. Yeah.
Or reframing.
That yeah, the less missed connections there are to the wrong 911 service. Yeah.
Well, Zopa mentioned some of the examples of the very remarkable activities of bodhisattvas, the jaw-dropping stories. In the same vein, I'll go ahead and just mention that one of the things, the ability to, you could say, burn ignorance right on the spot. Sort of the ignorance and confusion and energy is actually the fuel for kind of the fire of wisdom. And there are some of the deities that are, the description is standing in the midst of the fire at the end of time. And that fire burns all ignorance. So it's, that's another kind of dimension to it. But it's worth kind of developing that sense. So it's another piece of the courage piece too. Just having some sense that there's more resourcefulness. There's a deeper resourcefulness than we're usually think is possible. So there's more to do. So thank you, Bob. So we can dedicate that we may find this resourcefulness and be of profound benefit to beings. Virtue may I quickly realize Mahamudra and establish all beings without exception in this state. Thank you all.